Hello! In this video, we'll take a look at the problem with clipped highlights. A problem related to shooting for HDR is clipped highlights, and how to manage them in post-production. As I mentioned in the previous video, you want to expose to the right to minimize noise in the shadows, but at the same time be aware of any clipping of the highlights that might occur. Dealing with clipped highlights becomes more cumbersome in HDR, where in traditional SDR, a way to deal with overexposed highlights is to put them at the maximum 100 nits level, which will automatically roll them off. In HDR, the white point is not fixed, and there's no true white, so where you put the white point is a creative decision, and this complicates things a bit. So let's start with a couple of examples, where I actually don't really mind the clipping. First off, we have this shot from a nightclub. As you can see, the ice fountain sparkler emits a very strong light, and has clipped the signal of the sensor. Now, in this case, I want to make sure that the clipped part is white, and doesn't have any strange tint to it. We can get a quick overview by looking at the waveform parade, and confirm so all three RGB channels line up equally at the brightest point, which they seem to do here. I also like to use the qualifier with the option Show RGB Picker Value enabled. This will give you a per pixel reading that shows the numerical values of the three channels on an 8-bit scale, where 255 is the maximum value. Here it looks like we have a neutral white color. On the next shot, the sun is clipped, and in this case I think it works as well. Normally we can't look at a bright daytime sun and see any detail, so we don't expect to see that here either. If you take a look at the scopes, the channels look pretty balanced here as well. Although the green channel is a tiny bit lower than the red and blue ones. And by using the qualifier we can also confirm this. The difference is so small that probably nobody's likely to see it. But to make sure that the clipping is perfectly balanced, I will use the log highlight wheel to balance out the three RGB channels. Now, on the last shot, it's another story. Here, the clipping has left us with a big white hole, which doesn't fit in with the surrounding clouds, and needs to be addressed. To start off, I'm going to soften up the edges of the clipping by using blur. I'll start by adding the Gaussian Blur OFX plugin to a new node. And then create a key using the luminance qualifier, to affect only the part I want to blur. I also add some softness to the key to create a nice roll-off. You can also see that this treetops also becomes affected by this blur, but I'm going to let it be like that. To make sure that I don't affect any other highlights, I'm going to add a window around this area. And since the camera is moving, I also need to track it. In this case, I'll do a manual frame-by-frame tracking. Now, on this particular shot, I don't want to keep the clipped area white, so I'm going to introduce a color that blends with the surrounding cloud. Again, I'm going to use the log highlight wheel to accomplish a more targeted adjustment. Another technique to make this area blend better is to lower the brightness, to make the clip part more in line with the rest of the scene. If we now toggle these nodes on and off together, we can see a huge improvement. And by looking at the waveform scope, you can clearly see how the clipped signal is now nicely rolled off. To not affect the surrounding clouds as much, we can borrow the key from the previous node. Now, I could be done here, although I think the cloud looks a bit flat. So I'm going to try one more thing. To add back some life into the cloud, I'm going to add the Glow OFX plugin to a new node. I'm going to lower the shine threshold to 0.53, and then lower the brightness to around 0.2. This brings the cloud back to life and mixes better with the sun rays coming out of it. By toggling these three nodes on and off together, there's a huge difference from where we started. This can also be seen on the waveform monitor. Now, some shots might be even more difficult to fix, like when you have clipping of texture objects. That then becomes the job for the VFX department, where they use compositing techniques to add in the missing texture. So here's a summary of the different approaches you can take when it comes to clipped highlights. 1. Make them white by balancing the channels. 2. Roll them off using Gaussian blur. 3. Add color to make it blend better. And 4. Lower the brightness closer to the rest of the scene. 5. Bring it back to life with the Glow plugin. And 6. Add texture in VFX. Which of these techniques you choose to implement depends on your footage, and what you want to accomplish with your specific shot.